Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. Well, this is the first video of the new year. Better not muck it up. But it wouldn't be a Den of the Drake video if I didn't make an ass of myself, now would it? Anyways, have you guys ever heard of the Chosen One trope before? Of course you have, it's everywhere. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Kung Fu Panda, even Harry, guys, I swear Dumbledore was wearing a fursuit the whole time, Potter. The idea of the Chosen One is as tired as it is popular. And when something is popular, you know it's gonna get thrown into someone's D&D game. I mean, come on, it's inevitable. While it's okay to inject classic tropes into your games in the same way I inject horse tranquilizers, some tropes, like the Chosen One, can lead to some unwanted conflict. After all, in almost every piece of media that has a Chosen One, the honor is given to the main protagonist, which is kind of an issue in D&D, where you got anywhere between 4 to 8 people all wanting equal time in the spotlight. The story I have for you today stars a lawful stupid paladin, who uses her status as the Chosen One as an excuse to go on a self-flagellating rampage that leaves her party wishing that their special little Chosen One would have chosen another game to play. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This story comes to us from user Lady Azure89 and is titled, Lawful Good Paladin Goes Too Far After Becoming the Chosen One. Hello everyone. So this story is a few years old. And recently, after watching tons of Crit Crab and Den of the Drake, hey, that's me, I wanted to share a few of my own RPG horror stories with you all. This first one's a bit long, but it's one of my more recent ones. I haven't had a group meltdown like this one since. So this story involves 5 people, all of us seasoned players and role players coming into the game. First, our previous roommate of a couple years, DM, a good friend of ours, half-elf wild magic sorcerer, my husband, human rogue, myself, the tiefling bard, and lastly, the antagonist of this particular story, the DM's sister, a gold dragonborn paladin of Bahamut. So to begin, DM asked if me and a few others would like to take place in their homebrew 5th edition game. I was very interested, having had the itch to play for a while now. After gathering a group, DM told us to make characters that were interesting and outside of our normal builds and personality types, and the more detail and life we give them, the better. I have never gotten to play a bard, so I went with a tiefling bard that ran her own brothel within the city called the Blooming Rose, that had a unique business practice. My hubby played a human rogue and our friend played a half-elf wild magic sorcerer. They were gonna play as brothers and the children of the crime lord of the city, both donning a sort of wise guys style theme. To act the part, they completed it with a silly accent and sometimes over-the-top mafioso demeanor. DM's sister chose a golden dragonborn paladin, with a very stereotypical do-gooder attitude. The law is the law, and if you break it, you are scum. DM loved them, and gave us the time and date we would play our first session. In our first game, DM established how the world works, and the city we were in, etc., etc. She opened with me taking one of my employees to the local church for healing. That's where I met Paladin. We conversed a bit to get things started, them asking about my business, if it was sinful, and I would explain how I ran most of it, and that there was nothing inherently wrong with it, and that I was just providing a safe and fun experience for those in need of company. If Paladin's religion said that they weren't allowed to partake, that was fine, We didn't force anything on anyone. The priest finally came out and told us that my employee will be fine and that she just needed rest. She had been assaulted by a customer. I thanked them, and Paladin asked if they may tag along for a bit to talk, since they found me to be an interesting person. I agreed, and we left the church to walk about the town. We then changed the scene to the brothers. The DM painted the scene of them both going through an alley talking about business to themselves in a relatively quiet part of town, while making rounds for protection money, information on goods, etc., etc. When they are jumped by what looked to be a couple of thugs, but ended up being a pair of assassins. Combat ensued, and then the DM says that Paladin and myself could hear the sounds of a battle nearby. So we started to rush towards it. However, as we were about to finish the fight, Sorcerer's wild magic triggered. They roll and get the fireball spell, absolutely destroying the thugs. The two brothers ran in fear just as we arrived at the scene. All we saw was the charred bodies and two figures fleeing the scene. Paladin raised their weapon and declared, "Murderers!" as she gave chase to the two brothers. The DM looked panicked, and I jumped in an effort to stop Paladin. She got pissed, telling me that I was letting the murderers get away. I responded that we have no idea what just happened here. I asked the DM if I could poke around, and they let me roll a perception check, ending in me taking notice that in the charred body's hands were drawn weapons made for an assassin. After explaining that, I go on to motion to the scene, explaining that the two of us probably weren't suited to be taking on someone that could blow up an entire area in one fell swoop, nor was it our job to do so. Paladin grumbled and put their weapon away. The DM sighed in relief. We then went on to find a guard, where we explained what we had heard and saw before directing them to the scene. Not much later, Rogue and Sorcerer were sent to the docks by their father. Happy to hear that they were okay, but he was also dealing with a mountain of guild business, and needed them to find out why some shipments of various things had gone missing from a local warehouse by the docks. Meanwhile, a local guard told Paladin and myself the same, that medicines meant for clinics were being pilfered from the warehouse, and that if we could catch them, we could be a great help to many people. We met at the docks to fight a few thieves, and after we introduced ourselves to one another, we formed a loose party. However, Paladin was not thrilled with this. She somehow knew that Sorcerer was the person fleeing from the crime scene. Also that they were high-ranking in the Thieves Guild, and related to the crime lord of the city. Both the DM and myself reminded Paladin that she could not know that they were criminals, or that they were connected to the crime lord at all. While we adventured together, Paladin spent every chance she could to try to frame both the Sorcerer and the Rogue to get them in trouble. Of course, it never worked, but the hostility was quickly wearing on our nerves. Sorcerer, Rogue, and myself were irritated by her, but we were enjoying the world and the story, so we kept going. The next few sessions, we investigated the disappearances of villagers, which led us to a cult in a smaller town quite a ways away. It was a small town full of oddly happy but normal-acting people. At least until we started poking around, and then the town quickly devolved into a run-or-die scenario of illithids around every corner to try and silence the party before we could warn anyone. Which, in turn, led to us finding out that we were being invaded by illithids, who were pretty much pulling an invasion of the Body Snatchers. The session ended with us barely escaping out of the town and back into the wilderness. I should take a moment to explain our party dynamic. Rogue was the guy that cracked locks, safe, lips, and bones when it was called for, but cared immensely for his younger half-brother, the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer was the all-powerful but still budding caster, and brains between the two brothers who aspired to make his brother, Rogue, and his father proud. Paladin was the tank, who acted as though they were the party face, while also disparaging all of us. Then there was me, the smooth talker, and as time went on, healer and tank. Why was I the healer and tank? Because Paladin made it clear that she wouldn't heal criminal scum like them, or come to their defense in any way. If they die, the city will be clean of 2 more pieces of refuse. The thing about the brothers is that they, and even the guild their father ran, had a code. A don't take from people that can't go without it kind of code. They kept other, more ruthless gangs and organizations from taking root in the city, but Paladin didn't care. They were criminals, and criminals weren't worth protecting, even if they did contribute to a quieter and safer city. During this time, the DM had pivotal points happen for all of us. The brothers' father had fallen ill, and proclaimed his son, the rogue, will take over the guild if anything happens. Sorcerer found out more about themselves and their elven lineage, and began working to gain more control of the very chaotic magic they possessed and knew little about. I had become familiar and very friendly with royalty, most of all the current ruling queen. As for Paladin, DM said that they were given divine dreams from their god, who told them that they were his chosen one for making them popular within the religious sect and becoming their representative. Course, the second she was the chosen, every chance she had, she made sure to express this and make it known that her word was absolute, because she is chosen, like an anime protagonist. She also continued to make deals behind the scenes to eventually ensure the arrest or straight-up execution of both Rogue and Sorcerer's characters. Needless to say, she pretty much took on the "I'm the main hero" of this story attitude. She vehemently dictated what we were and were not allowed to do, again making all of us irritated. But we played nice because the plot was getting good, and we just figured sooner or later her ego would deflate. Oh, were we wrong. Oh no, oh god, this was definitely a mistake on the DM's part. While it's never a bad thing to engage with your party's individual backstories, giving them such a world-shaking role like a god's chosen one has a lot of potential to blow up in your face. In recent years, the fatal flaw of the chosen one trope has become more glaringly obvious. When a character is the chosen one of an ancient prophecy or omniscient being, well, the ending of the story isn't exactly a secret. It's literally written in stone that the character is going to succeed. And if you've ever played a game of Dungeons and Dragons, you know that success is anything but guaranteed. Look, the chosen one trope is only really effective in the modern era when it's subverted, and the chosen one is actually incapable of doing the job, and it's up to Johnny Unlikely to be the real hero. But I don't know of anyone who wants their character's main defining characteristic to just be a subversion for another character to take over. Giving a player the title of Chosen One puts the DM and the player in a weird spot. Either the character succeeds at everything and is guaranteed the W at the end, or they fail horribly, proving that whatever force deemed them the Chosen One isn't something to take seriously, which isn't the best for world building. And you sure as fuck don't make the lawful stupid control freak the Chosen One, because you know that's only gonna make things go ass up. At one point, I found critical information that Rogue and Sorcerer needed to know, so I drug Paladin with me to one of their hideouts, not thinking of the risk that just showing up there posed. A failure on my part, admittedly. Once we got there, I knocked on the door, requesting to see Rogue and/or Sorcerer. They came out shortly and expressed anger of just showing up like this, and how it was a risk to both them and the party. I apologized profusely, and gave them the information. Paladin, meanwhile, kept oddly quiet through this. We all calmed down and decided to make use of a method of communication through guild agents. I understood and offered my brothel as a meeting location from now on. The DM suggested using some of the guild's messenger birds, since they were already familiar with both the rogue and the sorcerer, as well as being a good way we can keep in contact without needing to show up in person when the party was split or off doing other things. Paladin and I leave together. However, sometime later we split up to do some light shopping. Paladin, however, decided to go back later to march up and try breaking into the hideout, while Rogue and Sorcerer were having a very heartwarming scene with their father, and a general good bit of roleplay. DM asked what Paladin was hoping to accomplish, to which she quipped, "To catch them all in the act of doing illegal things." Paladin fails to get in the door, and opted to just kick it down and shout in frustration once inside, "I'm going to turn you all into the city guards and have this place shut down. Hives of villainy have no place in my city." Paladin was laughed at by Rogue and Sorcerer above board, as Paladin got shot at and hit quite a few times by the people watching the door with ranged weapons, and were told off by both Rogue and Sorcerer. "Alright, look, we are supposed to be a team, and you are not only putting us in danger by trying to expose us, but also the effort to stop the invasion. Now go back to your church and butt out of the guild's business. You don't see us dropping by the church to start trouble, so don't do it with us." Wounded and annoyed, she left. As we investigated, we found out that the Illithids had already taken over some high-ranking positions, including many heads in the royal court. We got a private audience with the Queen, explaining her the situation and showing our evidence. The Queen explained that she had some idea of what was happening for some time, but she had no idea how bad things were until now. Getting on in years, she expressed that she did not feel that she was capable of dealing with such a threat, and that it was her lack of action that had already brought it to the point that it did. She asked what we felt we should do, and most of us came to the same conclusion. We needed to fight the Illithids and show that we will just not stand by and let them kill us and take over. At this point, the Queen says, "Each of you have quite a lot of pull in this city. I am going to summon a meeting and announce that I will be stepping down as Queen. And with no heir, it will be up to you to put someone that you know you can trust in my place by convincing the remainder of the court." We were all taken aback by this. None of us had planned to suddenly get the chance to be ruler of an entire kingdom. Paladin smugly says that they are the chosen one of their god, which is a far more noble role than being a paltry queen. We rolled our eyes and discussed what to do. Rogue and Sorcerer refused because of their position. It would not look good to have shady people like them on the throne. It was then decided that I would take over. The common people loved me, and my own connections with the everyday people and the dirt I had on nobles that often made a habit of visiting my establishments made it the best and easiest choice. The DM called it there, and told us to brush up on Parliament procedure and be ready for anything in 2 weeks. We discussed our plan after the game. Rogue and Sorcerer would get manifests ready to show proof that not only can I help supply an army, but was already set to help to do so. Paladin was going to bring the church members as both a demonstration of support and as backup if the Illithids were to try to escape. I was to present myself as a strong leader and give a rousing speech to show that not only could I lead a nation, but that I would not let any monsters try and stop me, no matter who they think they were, in order to not only inspire, but to intimidate any of them in the court. 2 weeks were gone in a flash, and then came the big game. I'm unsure what happened in between time, but I guess DM thought doing all that research before game was a bit too much, Or maybe the DM just got too busy. But when the game took place, the queen stepped down, and everyone was shocked. She then appointed my bard as her successor. I gave a few points about what's going on, what resources I had, and what was planned, and they all just voted and agreed for me to rule. We were all a bit disappointed, but we just rolled with it. As members left, a few stayed behind doing the evil slow clap. We confronted them, but wondered why they would approve of this. After a villainous monologue about how playing their cards just yet would be foolish, they transformed into their true selves, and the battle began. We fought hard and brought all but one down. However, before we could deliver a final blow, they summoned a portal, sending us to an unknown location. It was dark, cold, and floating above us was a grotesque, illithid-like creature in a giant sphere of water. It was Phase 2 of the battle. The dice gods were on our side, and we just barely survived. As it fell on the ground, it relinquished a runic stone of some kind. Sorcerer walked over and touched it. DM tells him that he sees other worlds that fell to the invaders. However, it seemed like they were not out to just conquer, but they were running from something and trying to hide in other worlds. Suddenly, a portal opens. Sorcerer asks to do an Arcana check on the stone, and gets a natural 20. DM explains that it's an anchor, and that we have a choice. Destroy it and deal with the illithids here, as well as whatever is coming, or throw it into the portal and make it another world's problem, as over time the illithids would be pulled from our world. DM warned us that there was no guarantee that they would not return eventually. Above board, it didn't take us long to decide what to do. We agreed to destroy it, to try and conquer the illithid threats, and to do our best to prepare for what else was coming. Rogue says that he will leave this to Sorcerer and the party to figure out, before deciding to go through the other portal to scout where it would drop us off, leaving me, Sorcerer, and Paladin alone. Here is where shit hits the fan. Sorcerer wanted to strike up a roleplay of coming to the decision. Back in character, he said, perhaps we should take a vote or discuss the options we had, and their pros and cons. Before he could finish his full thoughts, Paladin interrupts. We need to destroy it. Hand it over now, or I'll take it. Sorcerer shakes his head and says that we can just talk about this a little bit. Paladin doesn't wait another moment to roll a grapple and knock the runic stone from the sorcerer's hand. I want to make note that the sorcerer was defenseless, as she also proceeded to also strike him repeatedly afterwards. I rush over to stop her and heal him using my last spell slot. She throws him aside and points her weapon at me, stating, if you try to stop me or help him, I'll kill you too. This is exactly what I was talking about with the Chosen One thing. Honestly, one of the most incredibly irritating things a player can do is appoint themselves as the main decision-making force of the party. The rest of the group is just forced to nod their heads and say, yes sir / yes ma'am, as the player in question just rushes through the entire story at full speed with their party just floating lifelessly behind them like a bunch of disappointed party balloons. And any attempt to suggest a different course of action is met with a flat no. Look, you don't want to be this person for obvious reasons. So here is a basic approach on how not to be this person. It's a simple trick that I've learned from years of doing improv at the Ye Olde Tavern, called Yes and. Improv skills are a must for both players and DMs, and Yes and is one of the most basic frameworks. The idea is that you never want to hit another player with a flat no, because that will immediately kill the scene and any enjoyment that it may have brought. Instead, accept new ideas, but add on to them. Yes, and Of course, this doesn't apply to every situation, and you shouldn't just blindly go along with stuff your character wouldn't normally do. But it's also important to create an environment where you can have fun. You know, the whole reason you're playing the game to begin with? At this point, the sorcerer had had enough of Paladin's crap, and in truth, we all did. He was so upset and dumbfounded by what just happened. Rogue was as well. Paladin smiles smugly and declares triumphantly, "I proceed to go over and smash the stone." Both of them say that Paladin has pretty much just ruined the DM's game by ensuring that neither of their characters will ever work with them again. Sorcerer because she had effectively just curb-stomped him into an inch of his life, and when Rogue learns that, he probably won't want to work with them either, effectively ensuring that the war effort would lose the supply chains, scouting power, and contacts of the Thieves Guild. DM and myself are just left dumbstruck by what happened. DM sighs and decides to end the session there, probably to try and work on what she was going to do about this. Paladin grabs her stuff, thanks the DM for the great session, and leaves. DM is in shock, and she just stands there before staggering to her room. I talk to Rogue and Sorcerer. Sorcerer makes it clear that he will not play with her again, and that she had ruined any trust that they had in her character, and any fun to be had role-playing their characters together every chance she had. Being royally pissed off ourselves, we agreed. We decided that if DM wanted to go on, we will, but not with Paladin. The next day, DM asked to talk with me. She asks me if there was anything she could do as a DM, and Paladin's sister to reconcile things so the group can move on. I explained that Paladin has caused a very large rift in the group by flying off the handle, especially since DM didn't try to stop her or intervene. I explained that short of saying, "No, you can't do that, I won't allow it," she really couldn't have done much about it, and we don't blame DM. We were all upset with Paladin and her decision to just hulk out and beat up a fellow PC. I go on to say that if things were to continue, Paladin would need to apologize to the group, and to her as a DM, for derailing the game for what amounted to a "I am the chosen one. We do what I say or else" tantrum. But I didn't even think that would work. Rogue, Sorcerer, and I were fed up with how Paladin was acting. It went beyond just snide remarks about them being criminals at every turn and trying to have them locked up. It was disruptive and derailing to every session, to have at least one point where we must stop progression to indulge Paladin's lust for trying to fuck them over. Now, I had already talked with both Sorcerer and Rogue, and both had agreed to play again, if she was out, given how she behaved both in and out of character. She attacked one of her allies. Allies who, despite her character's crap, always fought alongside her. One who was defenseless in that moment, and not offering any physical resistance. If that's not breaking her oath to remain honorable and just, I don't know what is. So not only would her god turn his back on her, so would her church once they found out about her actions. And believe me, they would find out, because I would tell them that she was dragging their honor through the mud with their behavior. DM looked at me and explained that they had already talked to Paladin. And Paladin said that she did nothing wrong and didn't feel like she needed to apologize. That it was what her character would do. DM went on to explain that she didn't want to play without her, because she was her sister after all. Which is fine, but the rest of us would not play with her without some form of apology. But Paladin wasn't gonna budge. And so the game was over, ruined by Paladin's power trip. TLDR, Lawful Stupid Paladin goes on crazy power trip, tries to murder part of the party, threatens to murder the other, and then his surprised Pikachu face when we expressed that we didn't like what they had done, and claims that it's what their character would do, leading to the campaign going into permanent limbo. End of story. Oh boy, I could have bet money that this story was gonna lead into the classic, "It's what my character would do." Our paladin friend had the advantage of being the DM's sister, so I can understand why she wasn't removed from the party. I mean, after all, family should take priority over a game. But regardless, her behavior is less than healthy for a D&D group to operate. And while it may not seem like a happy ending, I would argue that it is. Because any frequenter of my channel knows that no D&D is better than bad D&D. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Dortchild, and depicts myself clutching my one and only babe. You may not like it, but this is what a true alpha male looks like. As a hoarder of cringe, I'll have you know that I take great offense to you. Your jealousy will not sway my love for my dear Jessica. Thank you again, Dortchild, for submitting your art. If you want to see your artwork featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can create content that inspires artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.